All right, locomotive cab. The controls instrument necessary to the routine operation of the locomotive conveniently located in the front of the engineer. Although the knowledge of the engineer equipment, the company illustration will enable the operator to understand the various modifications which may be encountered with the special equipped individual locomotives. The throttle. The throttle controls the speed of the power locomotive pneumatically, as shown in page 43 of the standard D1 controller. Equipment piping is somewhat different from the CE100 controller. However, both the types of throttle is advanced smoothly through the infinite position, the definite engine speed, and the power outlet at each speed or each position, which enables the operator to handle the train smoothly to reduce likelihood of the wheel slippage from the stepped-up applications of the power. No transition necessary at the CE100 controller is used largely in the dynamic braking installation because of the increased brake number and electrical connections involved. The electrical pneumatic action is in the automatic normal operation of both types of controls. The reverse lever. The lever controls the direction of the travel is interlocked with the throttle, so it cannot be moved except for the throttle is in off position. If it has three positions, forward, reverse, and off, the additional off braking position is powered by the locomotive equipped for the dynamic braking. The braking equipment standard for the 6SL braking equipment is mounted on the brake pedal, otherwise stated in these instruction gauges that are located on the control standard control panel for the front wall of the cab, and nameplates identifying the various electrical switches of the cab. The function of the lighting switches is obvious. The use of the other switches is clearly the operating instruction briefly. These switches are provided by the following purposes: the controller switch, the master switch is the control circuits must be closed to the start of the engine to operate. And then you see in picture typical D1 figure 4, the control stands of an S1 brake equipment. You have is a roundabout from the top some way from 1 to 2, 3 in a clockwise manner. You see the reverse throttle, the load ammeter, the main equalizing reserve pressure gauge, the brake pipe cylinder pressure gauge, the field out control switches, the heater rheostat, the alarm bell, the stack alarm button, the engine start button, the ground relay light and reset, the radiator fan hand shutter switch, the battery ammeter, the following oil pressure gauge, the water temperature gauge, the luge oil pressure gauge, the lure oil pressure gauge, the windshield wiper, the breaker pedal, still the whistle, the cab heater, the control, the pressure gauges, wheel switch, buzzer control switch, lighting switches, headlight switches, and handbrake, and the engineer's position in the cab. Following in manuals of the controls of the CE100 control standard, the dynamic braking is a little bit different. It starts at the very bottom left corner and it goes around clockwise, and it starts with the headlight switches, the lighting switches, control switch, the load ammeter, brake pipe cylinder, and pressure gauges, main equalizing reserve pressure gauge, engine start buttons, lighting heater, and auxiliary generator field switches, heater and rheostat, braking fan, relay reset, indicating light and fan stop, braking indicating light, braking overload indicating light, 14 indicating light grounded, 15 fuel oil pressure, 16 lube oil pressure gauge, 17 water temperature gauge, 18 lube oil pressure gauge, and the engine, 19 battery ammeter fan, 20 fan shutter switch, ground relay reset button, and 22 throttle, 23 reverse lever, 24 windshield wiper, 25 brake valves, automatic and independent whistle valves, and bell ringer and stand and control air pressure gauge and air reduction valve. And locomotive and on the locomotive is connected with the multiple unit operational control of the train line, and all units only leading in the control unit should have the control switch closed. Auxiliary generator field switch. The switch must be closed to excite the field in the chart of the battery with field excitation for the no power. The 35 amp switch is the select cab separate from the 200 amp auxiliary generator pedal switch in the cabinet, which is normally closed. The fan shutter. The switch feeds down feeds the fan control for the control switch control circuit, and normally the automatic position. See further details on the cooling water system. Engine control switch and the switches is only on locomotives equipped for the multiple operation unless otherwise specified, and fed through the control switch enables the operator to idle and stop of the engine with cutting on the locomotive circuits in which may be closed to the run of diesel or any of the unit so as equipped locomotive to the multiple may be controlled from the cabin of leading unit. The idle stop of the engine control switch, the stack alarm button, the cutout switches to check from the high exhaust temperatures in the case of the alarm, and press the button if the alarm stops if caused by the high temperature. Ground relay reset button cuts out the ground relay. Sees detailed description in the function page 25. We're on page 11. I'll we'll go over the details. Circuit breaker. The breaker types of switches are used in protecting the electrical circuits, the eliminating fuses of switches upon they automatically, when overloaded, are closed in the manual after opening the most necessary or the most move to the full off position before beginning the reclose. The control switch of the auxiliary generator field switch or lighting one switches, headlight switches are breaker. The alarm system, all indicator lights are audible should be thoroughly understood of the wheel lip slip buzzer. In an independent of any alarm, the alarm bell will be connected with several protective devices which encase indicator lights with general in nature of the trouble. The simple installation of a single unit locomotive provides an alarm bell stacked with a switch, a ground relay, in many cases the light without ringing the bell. On multiple unit locomotives, the ground relay, water temperature switch, engine shutdowns, oil connected to alarm bells which will ring all the units indicator lights. If any of the only the faulty unit, the frequently light was provided with a protective device shut down with the idles of the engine because itself is indicating the dynamic braking. In addition, lights may be installed as they're described there under. Here, the heater rheostat controls the variable speed fans in the cab heater. The electrical equipment, the safety note, the main power of the circuits operate at 600 volts or more. The cabinet doors should not be open, and authorized and qualified personnel when the doors open. It is important adequate safety be observed. Most electrical equipment is located in the cabinet situated between the cab and diesel electrical equipment, and from the cab is in the opposite page. The most equipment is the cab function automatically following the manual control by the switches and low voltage control circuit. And the crews should be familiar with the unit is the outline below. The battery switch must be closed and energized to all the control circuits with the lighting circuits except for the cab and the cabinets when fed directly from the battery. On the right, you see the view of the cabinet from the cab, figure 6. The starting with the top side left corner in the middle, going around clockwise about 9 o'clock. And going clockwise. Protected starting relay, the reverse control relay, the auxiliary generator power switch, the switches for the cutting off the track engine motors, ground relay, and the multiple units seen in the name panels, name plates, voltage regulator, the traction motor field, the shunting contact is the power control contact, the excited field contact of the traction motor field, the shunting control of the fan motor contract, the general field contract of the reverse control current contract, the pneumatic power switches, etc. The engine starting on the contracted battery switch of the reverse or the fan motor breaker and the fan motor relay. Circuit breakers with the following protective switches automatically when overload must make kept closed manually. Fan motor, high voltage power from the main generator, auxiliary generator, high low voltage from the control circuits of the fuel pump, motor, light battery, control lighting, various low circuits, and traction motors used in the event of the traction motor failure to the page 221 and the ground relay cut out of the switch for using the cutout in the ground relay until the ground high power voltage circuit is rectified. Multiple unit which installed utilizes the transferring control of the opposite end of the two locomotives as operated in a single unit is important for the operators to do not attempt to adjust the repair to the load regulator. The load regulator changes in the relay system. The principal electrical control equipment mounted in electrical cabinet, shutter valve, the engine shutdown lube, oil pressure, hot water switch, the temperature control, the switch's constant arrangement, equipment diagram, figure 3, the location of these items. Alright, locomotive operation. Summary of a normal operation. At the start of the diesel engine, the auxiliary generator field switch should be open at the B. The battery switch should be closed. The control switch must be closed. In the multiple unit operation, close the leading unit only. On the multiple unit unit equipment, close the engine control switch stand. Check the multiple unit switch is in correct position. Check the throttle and the reverse level are off. Number 1, start button. If necessary to crank faster, press the number 2 start button. Keeping the number 1 button in, please firmly into the unit until the lube oil pressure reaches about 19 pounds. Do not drain the battery if the engine does not run. Close the auxiliary generator field switch after starting. 2. Move the locomotive. Check the air pressure. Perform the brake test. Remove the release lever from the desired direction. Release brakes. Advance the throttle slowly. Keep an miscellaneous. Keep an ammeter reading with the posted load limits go to the full stop from before reversing. Reversing the lever interlocked and cannot be moved except for when the throttle is off. Check the gauge readings when stopping the retarded throttle before applying the brakes to avoid the electrical overload. To shut down the locomotive, open the control switch. This stops the engine. Open the battery switch. Only open the auxiliary generator field switch. Set up the brake and remove the reverse level and the brake handles to shut down the locomotive. Details of operation. Normal operation procedure standards are all service locomotives for the single unit operation. Additional equipment for the multiple unit operation of the dynamic braking also identical with each other. The following information applies to all such locomotives otherwise designated with the separated paragraphs is devoted to the special modifications in the equipment to the specific details of the multiple unit operation dynamic braking. Check the following supplies: fuel, engine, crank oil, oil compressor, crankcase, engine governor, oil, engine cooling, water, brand, sand. Check any of the leaks in the fuel, water, lubricating, oil, piping, leaking in the. Check on the leaks of the fuel, water, and lubricating oil pumping leaks of the probably a warm engine under the normal pressure, and any leaks observed under such conditions should be reported. Turn out the lights if necessary. On the most locomotives, no lights may be. The cab lights will burn until the battery switch in the equipment cabinet is closed. Inspect the engine and generator. The machinery for reacts tools may have accidentally left near moving parts. Start the diesel. Close the battery switch in the cabinet. While the cabinets are open, check the circuit breaker or closed auxiliary generator fan control lighting brakes. Check the traction motor cutout switch, the ground relay cutout switch, etc. and properly multiply the unit operation or set up properly multiple unit operation. The engine should be on. The multiple unit switch should be in single unit positions. Saying S will operate alone in lead. See in reverse lever, leave it in off position. Check the throttle is off. Check the control switch stands. The fuel supply that should start at the pressure of 25 pounds. Minimum should indicate the fuel oil pressure to the pumps runs. Non-pressure indicated with the check fuel supply. Engine fuel cut off valve at the fuel tank must be set necessary on multiple units. Alarm bell rings and until the start button is pressed. The control switch are not closed in the trailer unit. Press number 1 engine start button. If necessary, crank the faster. Press the number 2 engine start button, keeping the number 1 button in the press firmly upon the engine starts. The lubrication oil pressure in 19 pounds should gauge the releasing the start button before the required pressure is indicated and permits the engine from shutting down the device to stop the engine. If the engine does not fire, do not hold the button into the prolonged period. Should be continued with cranking while running down the battery. If the engine does not rotate, release the button immediately. Check the auxiliary generator field switch engineer position to establish normal field excitation for the charge of the battery. Let the engine idle under the water temperature reaches until the water temperature reaches 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Pumping the air. Engine runs and the air compressor will pump the air into the main reserve. Checking the main reserve air pressure to the compressor. Stopping the pumping at the governor cutout setting of 100 pounds per 140 pounds and reached. The air may be pumped in a higher rate with the locomotive in standstill. Initial charging line while the coasting downgraded with the train by the engine speed above the idling. Following the reverse lever of the off position, increase the throttle setting speed of the engine and compressor with the pumping up the rate as desired is reached. Return the throttle to the off position while the air pressure gauge registers required pressure. Be assured of the compressors resume pumping up the main reserve. Pressure drops the lower governor setting in the 125 pounds. Checking the control air pressure gauge that should reach 170 pounds. Moving the locomotive when engine starts with running throttle, reverse the lever or is off. Make sure that the automatic independent brakes applied. Release the handbrake. The traction motor blowers are operating properly. The radiator fans are and operating. The electrically driven. The fans should be in the auto position. Seeing cooling system for non-automatic operation. Move the reverse lever from forward to the forward or reverse position according to the direction the locomotive is to travel. Release the brake advance inch the throttle slowly until the concurrent indication of the load ammeter of the train is not in heavier grade. Serve the C. The locomotive will move, and the locomotive does move, and return to the throttle in to the off position immediately. When the meter registers current and the train stops, the movement slowly down through the position required for the train. Accelerated the train speed increases the train motor field. The automatically when shutting the field windings and with the resistance rendering it into the possible run of the higher speeds. Amperage increases the time of the shunting. No transition of the multiple operation is required. The throttle should be moved slowly to prevent wheels from slipping. The wheels should slip. The wheels should slip with the buzzer sounds, the diesel engine speed will automatically decrease until the slipping stops. If the wheel slips again, retard the throttle until the wheel slip stops. And no use of sand. See next paragraph. Sanding. Do not apply any sand while the wheels are slipping. Sand preventing the corrective measure. Always sanding sparingly. Even though the standard torque of the diesel electric locomotive makes up the sand seldom necessary. If the sand is necessary, if applied for the following, the locomotive is equipped for the high sanding, and the moving of the sanding lever in the forward position will apply to the sanding front, and the both moving of the lever reversing the position and apply to the rear. Both trucks and locomotive equipped for the electrical sanding turn of the sander valve in either the front or the rear of the both tracks, depending on the position of the reverser. The electrical load limits. Overdue the excessive loads can result in a serious damage of electrical equipment, which may be in the apparent immediately because of the failure later. Electrical apparatus for safety carry the overload for a limited time, maximum allowable temperature has been reached, and the table of allowable loads with the full engine speed is posted in the front of the engineer. The operator should always keep within the posted load limits. Overload is permitted only after the equipment is adequately cooled, then by the idling engine. In certain non-overloaded operations set forth on that plate, the time limit reached for any overload. No overload capacity exists with the amperage above the continuous rating. The engine must be then idled to cool the equipment unless the train continued to the full engine speed below the continuous rating. The crew should pay the careful attention to load limits at abnormal operation, as for example the traction motor and cutout of the motors overloaded as less than the fuel engine of the fuel product. The later condition may exist in humping and fewer tonnage upper under speed restrictions. Overload capacity considerable reduced for the blowers operating the less than fuel engine speed. The inspection during operation, check of the gauge, frequently investigate the report of the greater deviation from the normal. Lube oil pressure engine normal to 50 to 55 pounds. When the engine is operating at full speed, normal operating temperature has been reached. The lube oil pressure turbocharger normally 22 pounds to 25 pounds at the full engine speed. The fuel oil pressure normally 20 to 25 pounds. When the temperature is 150 to 190, the engine is too hot, and check the manual shutter for the control handle and not partially closed. Manual operation described in paragraph page 41 to stop the engine. Control air pressure normal 70 pounds. Rotate the hands of the metal edge lubricating oil strainer to the full turns every day. The strainer lubricated the radiator compartment. Check the cooling water level on the gauge's expansion every 8 hours. The level must be maintained with the water visible at all times. Check the lubrication oil level once every 8 hours. It must be maintained to show above the low mark of the bayonet gauge. Drain and main reserve on every 8 hours. The check battery ammeter should never show a discharge. When the engine is running, report the condition of the maintaining the high charge rate. After the starting engine will decrease, the approach to the zero battery becomes the full charge. Make a periodical visual inspection under the locomotive. The loose dragging parts report unusual noises. Orders of maintainers. 8. Cutting out the traction motor. Should failure that occurred in the traction motor, may be taken on the surface and means the traction motor which switch the equipment cabinet, and the switch may be two positioned with the switch toggle switch, multiple unit forward position rotary switch. All traction motors in one in circuit and affected by the simultaneous by such a switch on the Ford motor locomotive number 1 and number 3 motors are in one circuit. Number 2 and 4 motors are in another circuit. On 6 locomotives, the motor in the front of the truck are one in the circuit, and all motors in the rear truck are on another circuit. When the two position switch is open and the corresponding motors are cut out, the nameplate of the rotor type shall indicate the motors are cut out, and the motor. The return of the throttle reversibly lever to their off position. Do not throw the turn of the cutout switch under the load. Open the traction motor cutout switch. Operate the usual manner of the remaining motors, except for the load ammeter reading, and should not exceed half the value visited in load limit table. Stopping the locomotive. Retard the throttle to the first notch. When the load ammeter shows the current has dropped, the throttle may be moved off, and do not apply under any condition which causes an overload. And if the power ever fails to shut off while the throttle is retarded, and open the control. Apply to the brakes. Do not independently stop the heavy train. Use the automatic brake. If the locomotive left standing, temporarily move the reverse reverse lever applied to the handbrake. Reversing the locomotive reverser determines the position of the large reverser of the equipment cabinet. The controls of the direction travel from the locomotive. Reversing the field circuit of the traction motor changes the direction of the rotation. Never move the reverser lever of the locomotive until still motion, as they may cause damage to electrical equipment. Do not drift in one direction with the reverser level set in the opposite direction. To reverse the locomotive, move the throttle to off. Apply the brakes to the complete stop. Change the reverse level to the opposite direction. Release the brakes. Advance the throttle slowly. Let the engine idle 10 minutes, and despite the heat, open the control switch on the control stand. If the locomotive is controlled with multiple desired stop engine, the engine's control switch on the unit should accord to the nameplate designation. Open the control switch of the control stand with the stop of this engine. Locomotive's multiple controls with the cabin leading of the unit idles and stop the engine control switch. The emergency procedures open in the control switch. In the case of the fire collision for the other heads of the fuel with the read emergency field, the device at the rear corner of the cab, outside of the locomotive under the cab. The standing engine of the tripping of the cutting off valve, checking the throttle reverse lever off, and normally reset the fuel control off at the valve of the tank. The outside of the fuel in the cutoff pull ring is on the figure 7. It shows the fuel cutoff valve. Part 12, shutting down the locomotive. To stop diesel engine in a normal manner, as just as described, open the auxiliary generator field switch. C. Open up the battery switch, set the handbrake to release the air brakes, remove the reverse level, turn off the lights. If the locomotive is exposed to the freezing temperature, take necessary precautions outlined in the selection of the cooling water system. Pushers and doubler heading services in such a purpose controlled by each locomotive as usual manner in the service braking control of the leading locomotive. However, the brake pipe so that the non-control locomotive can release its own brake only. It avoids sliding over the heating of the wheels to conform to the standard practices in the railroad youth at your area. The pusher locomotive is a 6SL brake equipment. Close the brake, the two-position cutout place of the brake valve and the handles of the running position. 24 the right and left brake equipment, placing the rotary valve past the fit position depending on the surface required for the place, and the dead engine cocks in live position. Close the double heading cock of the place automatic of the valve position, independent brake valve in the release position. Towing the dead locomotive. To tow a dead locomotive in dead train, the reverse lever should be removed to eliminate the likelihood of the connection of the main power circuits. The brake should be operate like those in the train. The place of the double heading of the cock in the dead position. Place the brakes valves in running position. Remove the handles to open the charge cock of the dead engine feature if desired to keep the maximum braking power below the standard. Reduce the adjustment safety of the valve of the disturbing the valve so it's open 25 pounds. 24 right and left brake. Close the double heading cock and place the automatic brake valve in the running position. Independent brake valve in the release position. Remove the handles. Replace the rotary valve in the pass position. Place the dead engine cock in the dead position. Alarm the protective devices. The protective devices function as follows, except for the stack switch is always connected with the bell. Devices are usually connected with the alarm. Multiple unit locomotives only to some equipment such as train control. When installed, the independent alarm dynamic brake are connected by the standard bell but are described in the braking section, and a separate list of operating difficulties gives clues of all troubles of the following directions concerning the alarm that help locate, certificate, and trouble with more quickly defiance. Start switch closes. Due to high exhaust temperatures, remedy to determine whether it is caused by pressing or the stacking switch cutout button of the control panel to see which with the alarm ceases. If you see the operator reduce the throttle, ground relay close. If so, operate and reduce the throttle. Due to defective high voltage circuit such as installation breakdowns, sluggish and dirty electrical equipment may cause the temporary short circuits. The engine idles and the ground light burns on multiple unit equipment, and the alarm rings also. The remedy of the ground condition should be rectified if the ground clears themselves. The ground relay button restores the circuits in normal position. Instances the ground alarm persists in pressing this button, and it's necessary to pull into the clear to operate the terminal point. Open the ground relay circuit cutout switch of the cabinet. Do not operate with a prolonged period of the switch opening governing local operation rules. Water temperature switch closes. Do not use hot engine. It is idle engine. If check checking the cooling to separate the description. Engine shutdown device is actuated due to low lube oil pressure to the operating difficulties to the lack of the fuel because of the empty tank of the trip to safety devices. Remedy rectifying any faults of the lube or oil or fuel oil system. Reset the overspeed. See the next item. The engine overspeed of the engine it prevented from the extending specification. See the RPM through the action of the overspeed stop. The application situated at the front of the camshaft casing at the generator end of the engine is the spring-loaded tripping device set to trip the predetermined camshaft speed of the tripping operating actuating plunger, which moves the fuel control with the no fuel position. It stops the engine before the starting of the engine and overspeeds to stop the reset. Part 16, miscellaneous operations. Some items in the equipment following operation special modifications which installed only when specified purchaser are running through the water is if necessary to operate through water. Keep the speed low enough to avoid the splashing of the motor to avoid waters moving 3 inches above the top of the rail. Operating over the crossovers to reduce the throttle crossover to avoid the excessive jarring of the gears, electrical pitting of the commutators. The relaying locomotives do not drive the relay locomotive under its own power. The serious damage may result in the traction motor from the spinning of the wheels. However, if only one pair of the wheel is desired, the most possible re-rail locomotive under its own power by cutting out the motor driven and the derail wheels. The dual control stand. Each control stand is provided with a control switch. The control switch must be closed and controlling the stand opening the other stand. The throttle is operated in the stand which switches and closed because of the master control of the valve. MC control switch. Pneumatic lines. If the throttle is set by the control switch, changing from one stand to the other necessary to the control switches for the necessary simultaneously possible. The engine is kept running in the prolonged delay of the interfere with the fuel supply, de-energizing the engine, shut down the valve of the fuel pump, charging the reverse of the brake handle, and the cutting of the non-operating brake valve is done to the routing manner. Control cutout valve, the CC valve, CCV is connected with the multiple unit switches so that the throttle does not function on any trailering unit model in the multiple unit operation. The action of the MCV and the CCV is automatic, provided the manual operated switches are set properly. Overspeed controls. The maximum recommended speed of above 65 miles per hour. Slightly higher speed is reached. Overspeed of the initiates of server is the application of the air brakes. The diesel engine automatically idles when such an application occurs. The engine is the first given in the whistle warning. The 6-second delay feature enables him to reduce the speed of the suppress the automatic application of the dead man pedal. The dead man foot pedal is a safe device which must be depressed at all times if the locomotive is in operation. Release the dead man pedal to cause a warning whistle of the sound of approximately 5 seconds, after which the brakes automatically applied for the engine through brought the idling speed. The dead man pedal is depressed with the warning period. However, no action takes place. Recovery and after the penalty and emergency brake application following the emergency speed brake train control dead command. Similar extra and ordinary brake application move the throttle of the opposition. In most instances, the interlocking such as the traction motor automatically disconnects and overloading them. However, the further interlocking prevents the restoration of electrical current circuits until the throttle is in off position on the 24 right and left brake and in place in the automatic brake and lap position. The brake system recovers. Multiple unit operation.